Hey everybody, welcome to another episode here on Bully Whispers, and we are here today to evaluate Law 4 of Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, Always Say Less Than Necessary, in the TV show The Wire. Now, this is an interesting law for me to evaluate in any series because I think the wording is terrible. Personally, I think a better wording would have been never say more than necessary, for reasons I will get into at the very end of the episode for anyone who's interested. However, the points Greene makes in coming to his horribly worded conclusion are both quite sound and very applicable to the show. So in this episode, we will evaluate Law 4 in The Wire through the two main pillars supporting it. Namely, the many different dangers in talking too much, which we will see through Old-Faced Andre, Marlo with the security guard, and the mayoral debate, as well as the aura that comes along with being the cold, quiet type, since Greene does state that powerful people impress and intimidate by saying less. In order to examine that aspect, we will compare some of the higher level guys and enforcers like Chris Partlow, Slim Charles and Cheese Wagstaff in terms of how intimidating they are versus how chatty they are, and any effect one may have on the other. Now before we get started, please let me know down in the comments who you think is the most intimidating person from the group, and whether or not you think their talkativeness helped, hurt, or had no effect at all on their presence, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on it before potentially being influenced by mine as well as after. When evaluating the dangers in talking too much, especially in terms of an illegal enterprise, two problems immediately come to mind, even though there are a couple more. First, it increases the chances that someone that you don't want to hear, like another gangster or a cop, will hear, and of course, second, the more you speak, the more likely you are to say something stupid.
I know, but we gotta hit right back, make a statement, but I'm not saying who did that shit. You asked him who it was? Yeah, I asked him. Why? Why what?
But the problems go a bit deeper than that. Oftentimes, rather than coming off as smooth and intelligent, the verbose come off as hapless and unsophisticated, which is what we see from Andre when he is trying to talk his way out of a problem with Marlo. And of course, that didn't work out well for him, nor did it work out well for the security guard when he stepped to Marlo and demonstrated another problem with talking too much: you might offend the wrong person. As Greene notes, once words are out, you can't take them back, which is a concept that Chris understands.
Think so? Ain't saying Omar can't be got. Any nigga can be got. But once we put word to ear, and he learned that we pressing on his head, he's gonna be trying us like we trying him.
So let this be a lesson to everyone. If you're gonna talk about somebody, make it something nice.
That's a good strong dick you got there, and I see you know how to use it.
Of course, Greene also points out that there are times when it is unwise to be silent because it would arouse suspicion, which brings us briefly to the politicians, who, due to the nature of their jobs, can't really be silent. For most of the mayoral debate, Royce was confident and concise until Carcetti brought up the dead witness. At that point, he stopped speaking directly and concisely and began getting overly wordy in his attempt to explain things. Now, granted, he was in a bad spot, but his response made it so much worse by making him look hapless and lacking control. Had he gone the normal politician route and just brushed it off with some vague answer like "we're looking into it but it's too early to say," which is what Greene suggests to do, he probably could have walked away from the debate without much of a hiccup to his campaign. After all, if Marion Barry can get caught on camera smoking crack with a hooker and get reelected, I'm sure Royce could have withstood a bad debate. The bitch set me up, a phrase that holds a special spot in the hearts of many from DC.
So that's a crack hoe.
But anyways, this is where we get to the part in which we evaluate Greene's statement that powerful people impress and intimidate by saying less. However, there are 2 points that need to be made before moving forward. First, all of them can and will kill you, which is significant because it means that their respective levels of intimidation aren't based on a perceived potential for a different outcome. This is also the reason I didn't include the up-and-coming 8th graders like Michael Lee, Namond, and Randy in this comparison, even though I had initially planned to. Since we know Michael is the only one of the 3 who will actually do anything, it doesn't really matter if he's chatty like he's been going line for line with Tony Montana all night, he is still going to be the most intimidating. And second, there is a difference between being intimidating in the moment and having an intimidating aura surrounding you and your name in general. A good example of this is when Bunny Colvin takes the man from academia into the interrogation room to show him that 18 to 21-year-olds are too old and that he should look to help younger kids. At this point, it would be fair for you to ask, who would want to be stuck in there with him? And as much as you should always be suspicious of somebody who answers a question with a question, my response would be, well, would you rather be in there with someone like Chris Partlow? Now, while being on the more expressive side doesn't necessarily make you less intimidating, It also doesn't necessarily add the level of intimidation to your name that makes people afraid of you even when you aren't around. In the case of this guy, it's easy to say he's not as intimidating because he's handcuffed and locked up. So let's take it to the streets with the people who aren't locked up and start comparing the higher level guys like Chris, Slim, and Cheese. Now, Cheese is by far the chattiest of the three, and we quickly see him insulting the wrong person with Brother Muzone.
Oh, what? You slinging bean pies up in here or something? You know what I mean? You with the nation, homie? Because either you a Muslim or your mama need to stop laying your clothes out in the morning.
Who shoots him shortly thereafter, although to be fair, that was probably going to happen no matter what. Insult or not, Brother was going to tell him to leave, Cheese was going to say no, so Brother was going to shoot him. Nevertheless, it does go to show that side of his character. Either way, Cheese is the least intimidating of the group, and in his case, his chattiness has a lot to do with it. Now, while there are several reasons why this is the case, the main one is that it makes him incredibly easy to read. Everyone will always know exactly where they stand with Cheese, which gives him a level of predictability that Greene says in many of the laws is quite detrimental in the game of power. If Cheese is mad at you or coming after you, you'll probably know it. Now, when comparing Slim and Chris, it's important to keep in mind that we aren't just determining who is more intimidating. We are comparing how their talkativeness helped or hindered their levels of intimidation, and these two are great for comparison because while neither one says more than necessary, Slim is slightly more chatty than Chris. This chattiness is likely due to the fact that Slim is just a friendlier guy than Chris, and it does present some positive benefits for whoever he works for. The fact that he tends to be on more cordial terms with people means that he will have an easier time getting close to people he needs to kill, since they would be more comfortable around him. But that's the problem in terms of this discussion. They would be more comfortable around him than Chris because he is less intimidating than Chris, and that's largely due to Chris's silence. For those of you who've made it this far, thank you, and this is why I think Law 4 isn't worded very well. Personally, I think never say more than necessary would have more accurately conveyed the underlying ideas behind the law, and always say less than necessary almost inevitably leads to a which came first, the chicken or the chicken egg type of discussion. This is something I just danced around in the Sopranos episode, but I'm going to take a quick second here to address it using some examples from The Wire. In the book, Robert Greene gives King Louis XIV as an example of someone who said less than necessary. He was intimidating because he was so quiet and always gave vague answers if he answered at all, sort of like Chris Partlow.
Ryan in your repertoire no more, nigga.
However, in order to craft that image, that is what was necessary. Similarly, when Carcetti says less than necessary to get things done around the city.
On my way downtown today, I saw an abandoned car. Tow it right away.
Where is Mr. Mayor? The location. Oh, fucking Christ.
And either doesn't answer questions or gives vague answers like Greene suggests.
Mr. Mayor, I understand your concern, but you've got to understand, we have more than 9,100 hydrants.
And one of them's leaking.
That is what was necessary. In that sense, anytime an endeavor is successful, you can make the argument that everything that was necessary was said, maybe even more, but at least all that was needed, otherwise it would have failed. Well, thanks for watching this episode here on Bully Whispers. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.